Hello, everybody. Ty here, host of the Jalapeno Podcast. This episode is with Hayden Pedigo, guitarist and musician. Hayden Pedigo, whom I met through mutual friend Patrick McDermott, aka North Americans. Hayden recently signed a deal with Mexican Summer, a record label out of Brooklyn, and his new album, which Hayden says is his best work yet, comes out in September. So keep your ears and eyes out for that. Meantime, check Hayden Pedigo on Spotify. Hayden also made a splash recently running for Amarillo City Council, about which a documentary has been made and will be released in July called Kid Candidate. Meantime, find Hayden's music on Spotify, clips of Kid Candidate on the World Wide Web, and right here, right now, you can get to know him on this podcast. Here we go. So, Hayden Pedigo, welcome to the show.
How are you?
Good, man. Thanks for having me over.
Thank you. Thanks for coming over.
Sunday morning, Lubbock, Texas. And this is not your hometown, or it is?
It is not my hometown. I'm from Amarillo, Texas originally.
Got it. That was my my lodging last night in a Walmart parking lot in Amarillo.
Nice.
Pulled in around 11 p.m.
Nice.
Set up shop. It was lovely. And then hit the road pretty early this morning. It was cool driving down here.
Yeah.
Like full cloudy sky. There's like a hint of clarity on the horizon, but other than that, just one big, it's kind of smoky gray cloud.
Yeah.
And hardly any cars.
What's kind of funny, because Amarillo and even Lubbock, I was talking to a friend the other day how people kind of rag on this landscape because they say it's flat and ugly. But if you grow up in this area, you kind of learn to love the flat spaciousness of it. You feel like you can breathe a bit.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. The premise of landscape is very interesting to me, and how your natural surroundings or unnatural surroundings impact your emotions and sort of your way of being. And was curious if and how that reality has played into your musical interests or musical expression.
Yeah, that's a weird thing, 'cause I feel like the Texas Panhandle and growing up in Amarillo was like the thing that influenced my music the most. Kind of neck and neck with my actual musical influences. The landscape was just kind of right up there with what inspired me, because I don't sing, it's all instrumental guitar stuff, but spaciousness and simplicity definitely factors in, because the landscape out here is just so unbusy. Mm-hmm. There's not really much to it, so I definitely think it seeps into the music.
Yeah. The Terry Allen on the documentary is talking on one of the documentaries made about him, talks about how the fact that when you can always see the sort of the never-ending horizon, mm-hmm. and how that keeps you kind of wondering what's out there, or what's over the edge. You're always aware of this expansiveness. And I thought that was kind of compelling, considering, the sound of his music is sort of invites you to visualize landscape, I think.
Yeah. I feel like Terry Allen's kind of an interesting case, because he's from here in Lubbock.
Yeah.
But his music, I always found it funny because it definitely has a tint of like chip on his shoulder, which makes it kind of funnier. So you can't fully resent it, because he knows what it gave him, but you could tell he wanted to get out of here as fast as he could, which is weird. I currently work at Monterey High School, which is where he went to high school, which is kind of weird. Sometimes I'll go to work and be like, Terry Allen went to high school here. It's really strange to think about.
So you're a teacher?
No, I'm not a teacher. I just work kind of like in the office administrative type world. But it was just kind of, I moved to Lubbock last year because my wife's getting her master's in theatrical stage design at Tech, and I wasn't really used to Lubbock, didn't know this place all that well, and I kind of just, because of COVID, wanted something to do, needed some work, because I'd been working in banking stuff and just started working at the high school. Mm-hmm. But it was just kind of something to do while waiting out all this COVID stuff.
Yeah. So what was it like growing up in Amarillo?
It was unique. I kind of grew up in a more Christian type family. My dad was a pastor at a truck stop, at the Petro truck stop. They would have a chapel out there. And I don't know, it was just, I grew up out in the country out there, and it's like the definition of sparse, empty Texas panhandle. And I have a strong love for Amarillo, but it's a tough place. It's not an easy place to live in a lot of ways.
In what ways?
I mean, it's just kind of it's very, very isolated. Amarillo feels disconnected from everything, and it was just, you're just kind of out in the middle of nowhere, especially where I lived. And that's kind of how I got into music was, my dad was a preacher, lived out in the middle of nowhere, was homeschooled the entire way. So I just kind of got lost into music. That's kind of all I was interested in. And it kind of links back into the influence of it all as the landscape and where I lived and the influence of the music all kind of created what I ended up making.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any siblings?
I have an older sister, yeah.
Older sister. And was music always part of your life?
Starting around 10 or 11, that's when I really started to fall in love with music. And then when I was 12, I started taking guitar lessons. And then from there, it was kind of interesting. I was kind of talking with someone the other day how I was at that weird age where I just started getting into the internet, but most of my musical discovery was through the library, because back then you could rent CDs at the library. And I, like, at 11 years old, I was into stuff like Santana and Stevie Ray Vaughan. And then I would go to the library and start renting CDs, and then it started to be things like Frank Zappa and Wes Montgomery and Miles Davis. Like, through the library, my taste started to get weirder and weirder. And my parents were more conservative, so for an example, they wouldn't let me listen to like Dark Side of the Moon. Like that was druggy music. There was a story of when I was 11 or 12, I went with my dad to a CD store and bought Dark Side of the Moon on CD. And as we were walking out, my mom saw it. Was like, no, that's druggy music, take it back. So I owned Dark Side of the Moon for 15 seconds. And I've never bought that album again. Like, that's the only time I owned Dark Side of the Moon was in those 15 seconds, and then returned it.
Because your mother was right.
Well, yeah, it was druggy. Yeah, it was druggy music. But I've joked that because of my parents' like strictness with music, I got into more experimental music because I couldn't listen to Pink Floyd. I started listening to King Crimson. Because I couldn't listen to King Crimson, I started listening to Tangerine Dream. Like, I knew the weirder I got, the less they knew about it, the less reason they had to say I couldn't listen to it.
Wow.
And it's kind of funny. Like, I probably became more of a freak through the experimental weird music than I would have been if my mom would have let me just own Dark Side of the Moon, which is kind of funny. My parents' strictness is the reason I got into unique music, so I have them to thank, because it challenged me to get weirder, because it's just like, if I would have been content with Dark Side of the Moon, like, who knows what could have happened.
Man, that's a good way of looking at it. That's fascinating. It's sort of an unintended consequence of the strictness put you down an even weirder path.
It did.
So when you were going through the library, were you just sort of, like, how would you describe that? Were you just kind of looking around, random selection, then one thing led to the next, or like, how do you even know where to begin?
So the thing that was interesting was you had this whole, it was a really big CD collection, a really impressive CD collection, and on top of that, the library had a bunch of music books. So when I'm like 13 or 14 years old going in there, I remember specific CDs that stand out in my memory. They had the 2-disc Miles Davis Live at the Fillmore, like 1970, like with an electric band. And hearing that stuff really was kind of mind-blowing for me, because I was just a guitar player back then. And then I would rent books. Like, there was a book called Avant Rock that was basically profiling the lineage of Yoko Ono to Sonic Youth to John Cage. And I was just kind of a primer for me into experimental music. So then when I was reading these books, I would go to the CD section and see what I could find, like a John Cage CD or Miles Davis CD. And then finally, that's around the time I started getting into the internet. And there were blogs like Mutant Sounds, Blogspot. And that was a website where it was just uploads of the weirdest experimental albums you could think of, the strangest stuff, just free rips of music. So it was like, that was such an explosive time for me, music discovery wise, because I was just going crazy finding all of this really bizarre stuff. And then at 14, I found John Fahey, and that probably was the big thing that changed everything. Because that was, I always joke that I'm left-handed, but I play guitar right-handed normally. But my left hand, my fretting hand, can't move super fast. So I could never, at 11 and 12, I was always frustrated that I couldn't play like Stevie Ray Vaughan or Jimi Hendrix because my hand just couldn't move fast enough to shred like that. So then when I found John Fahey, the finger picking on the right hand, I started messing with that and learning that. And it was a moment of like, okay, this is how I can play guitar.
Cool.
Like this is how it works, because I can never, again, it's kind of like the restrictiveness with my Mom and the Dark Side of the Moon CD. Because I couldn't shred with my left hand, it required me to think in a different way and pick with my right hand.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this is where my strength is in the opposite hand. Because in so much of guitar playing, a lot of skill set is thought of to be on the fretting hand. But if you look at people like John Fahey, if you look at the chordings and what he's doing with his left hand on actual neck, it's very, very simple. Like he's holding chords, but all of the technique that's going on is in the picking hand.
Yeah.
So again, the limitations are what led me to figure out how to play.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating insight. I think anytime a constraint, you're presented with a constraint and you can either back off and go try something else or use it sort of as a portal for new creativity.
Yeah.
Using the constraint to your favor to develop your own kind of nuanced way of doing the thing.
Yeah.
Whatever it might be. Yeah, I love John Fahey. I have him playing in the van often. Actually, speaking of Patrick, I wrote a, how Fahey has all those requiem songs, Requiem for whomever.
John Hurt.
My best friend growing up passed away, and this happened 15 years ago, but recently I wrote, I guess you'd call it a poem or just kind of a spoken word song thing, called Requiem for Ted, and then Patrick let me use his song Furniture in the Valley to accompany it. And that Requiem premise was inspired by, I just thought that was so sweet that he had all these songs that were memoriams to, I don't even know who those people are, but I imagine they're his loved ones.
Yeah.
But it's such a nice idea.
Yeah, it's very cool. That's very cool.
Well, that's awesome. So I don't have a music vocabulary. How would you describe your music? You mentioned experimental music being an influence. Is that how you describe yours, or how would you?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, it's kind of changed a lot over the years, because early on, I was a lot more experimental. Like, I would do the Fahey type guitar stuff, but I was really into experimental noise and soundscapes and ambient stuff. But I don't know, it's just kind of like, currently my newest music is so guitar focused and less experimental that it's probably new age in tone, just because using reverb and things like that to pad out the guitar. But I would say it's very just, it's of that American primitive cloth. I would say it's definitely, again, more influenced by the Texas thing, but I don't know what I would call it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even know. To me, that doesn't mean a lot, no matter how things are described, because I just want to listen to it.
Yeah.
But I know that certain people might ask, well, what kind of music is it?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know, just listen to it.
Yeah. I just say instrumental guitar stuff. It's relaxing and kind of pretty.
Yeah, I'll say so. Beautiful. And the new album is called Big Tex.
That one's a duo album I did with Andrew Weathers.
Okay.
That's a duo one we did. That was just kind of a collection of improvisations we had done over the past 4 years that he assembled. I have a new one coming out in September, and that's one of my solo ones.
Okay, great. And that's coming out through Mexican Summer?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
That's my first one with them.
Yeah, and congrats on that. I saw that news. That's major. How do you feel about it?
It's amazing. It's before we started, I was kind of telling you that I didn't really know anyone at that label, but I was always aware of Mexican Summer. And I was kind of like, when I finished this album, just long story short, I started writing and recording this album in fall of 2020, and I kind of set out to make my best guitar playing album with my best playing on it, the best melodies, and recorded it in a studio in Littlefield. And when it was done, I was kind of like, I think this is the best thing I've ever made. It was just felt like a step up from anything I had done. And I wanted to start kind of pitching it around to labels. And I had a friend, I asked him, I was like, what labels do you think would be a good fit for this? And he said, what about Mexican Summer? And I kind of laughed at him. I said, well, I don't know anyone there. And I said, I think they're kind of too big for what I'm doing. And it was kind of a joke. So I created a SoundCloud link for the record and started sending it around. And I paid for the SoundCloud Premium. And when you have a private link on there, through Premium, you can see who's like listening to the record if they have a SoundCloud account. And one day I was like looking, and it showed Mexican Summer had listened through the record. But the thing that was weird was I hadn't sent it to them, which that was kind of odd. You're just like, wait, you're like, wait, how did they get this? That's kind of strange. So I ended up, it was kind of a chain of events what ended up happening, but I had sent the record to Matt Worth at the label Revenge, RVNG. I'd sent it to him, hey, just check this out. And I didn't know he worked, I believe as a creative director for Mexican Summer. I didn't know he was connected with them, but I guess when I sent it to him just to check it out, I guess he sent it over to Keith at Mexican Summer, and he had given it a listen. And it kind of became this process of getting on the phone with him, talking about this album, and they were like, well, we're pretty busy and we don't know if we can put it out this year, but we'll get back to you. So then it's kind of this stressful month of sitting around kind of going like, there's no way this is going to work. And then finally it ended up happening, and obviously I was pretty over the moon about it because they're an incredible label. I mean, they've put out some absolutely incredible stuff. Yeah. And they also just really get music, and they have I feel like a really defined thing. It's one of those kind of like, I don't like to use the word branding because I think it's music, so it goes deeper than that. But I hate to use branding or aesthetic, but their thing is so specific. Yeah. It's kind of like, and I feel like there's certain labels like Sacred Bones too, like Mexican Summer, Sacred Bones, that they're very defined. That if you see a Sacred Bones release or a Mexican Summer release, before you even put it on, you kind of have a vibe of like what you're getting into. Yeah. And that was something I was really excited about, was they're so specific with what they do. But then again, they're so all over the place and different. You know, like Ice Age is on Mexican Summer. Right. And you can have like Jeffrey Cantula, Desmond, all these people on the label. They're so different, but they're kind of in that unified aesthetic. The same with that Marfa Myths Festival. Right. I feel like that, I've never gone to it, but just looking at the lineups of it, it's so Mexican Summer. But you can get Terry Allen on there playing with, you could have a group like Deer Hunter or something like that on that same lineup, but it kind of makes sense. Yeah. I went to, I guess, the most recent one they did, 2019 or 18. And it was, great time. It was Deer Hunter, Cass McCombs, Khruangbin, and then, you name it. But, Mexican Summer, congrats, and that must feel great. I mean, they have such talent. They've shown me, for sure, a lot of cool music that I maybe wouldn't have found otherwise. One of the guys I just recently signed, Sessa. Have you ever listened to him? Yeah. I like that. Yeah. His stuff's very, very relaxing. Yeah. Very nice stuff. Yeah. That's awesome, and that's definitely a vote of confidence, I'm sure, and exciting, especially because you mentioned this is the best thing that you've ever made. And now to have that as a platform for hopefully more people to find out about it. Yeah. You must be stoked. Yeah, it was exactly what I hoped would happen, because I kind of had this idea of like, I want to make a record that's, worthy of a step up like that. You don't want to like make an okay record and it work. Like, I would feel worse if I made just an okay record and then it works out with them. It's like, if I'm going to release with Mexican Summer, I want to make sure it's something that people would think was worth, I want people to go like, wow, this is really good. Yeah. And I'm not trying to like brag. I'm not saying it's amazing. I'm just saying for my music, I felt like it was the biggest step up I've made with my guitar playing specifically. I just wanted to make a record that was technique wise, a guitar, like something that would hold up to like a Leo Kottke album or a John Fahey album. And that's why on this one I avoided ambient experimentation, droning. There's really none of that. It's just a melodic guitar album. And the thing that was tough when we made it was I had these 7 songs written as solo guitar pieces. And I had been practicing them for a month because they weren't like simple droning little things to add overdubs. They were like songs on guitar meant for a solo piece. So when I went into the studio with my friend Andrew recording, the first day we went in, he had the mic set up, and it was like, I kind of had this idea that I wanted to record it like Leo Kottke's 6 and 12 string guitar album that I did for John Fahey's label Tacoma. And the story was Leo Kottke recorded the entire album in 4 hours because he went into the studio, sat in front of the mic, played everything he knew, and that was it. Like, that's how he did it. So Andrew had the mic set up. I went in. It was just, okay, let me know when you're ready. And live, just in a whole take, I would have to play the song through because we couldn't piece together. Like, it had to be a perfect take. So it was nerve-wracking because when you're, at least for me, when you're recording solo guitar pieces, if you screw up after 3 takes, you're done, because once you psych yourself out, you can't keep going. So you really have 3 takes to get it right. So it was just kind of like when he pressed record, I just would have to sit there and play it through the whole way. And that first day we recorded the entire album at its core, the guitar pieces. And we went back to the listening room and he's just playing it back, and it's just these dry solo guitar tracks, no reverb, no anything. And it was this feeling of like, oh shit, like I hope this is a good album, because it's so dry and it's just like one guitar. And he was like, trust me, like once we get this mix, the reverb on and the overdub's done, it's going to sound really good. So we did 2 more sessions where we would go in and I would track separate guitar parts and we would add piano and things like that. And then by the time it was done, it just felt like the pieces were perfect. Like they sounded exactly the way when I was playing them on my back porch by myself. It just captured the essence of those songs. And it was a relief just because it was so stressful recording them. Because it just, I'm not a good enough guitar player to feel like it's easy to just knock out solo guitar tracks. They're just kind of scary, especially when they're like, they're not droning type ones. They're like a song. They have a melody and a bunch of chord changes. They're kind of scary to play. Yeah. And we ended up doing the whole record and there was only one thing we had to fix, because there was like a 12 string track that opens the record where there was one little part in the middle of it where I just didn't like how it sounded. So we just had to redo that one thing. But for the whole record, I think most of them are first takes. Wow. And I would have like not even a little mistake. It would be like a little what I thought was a flub. And Andrew would tell me, like, don't get in your head, it's good. Yeah. And I had to learn to like lighten up a little bit and not be a perfectionist, because I listened, stuff that I thought I messed up on, I would listen back to and it'd be a pretty straight take. Yeah. So he kind of had to tell me to lighten up, where it's like, don't worry about little flubs, just like play it through the whole way. And the whole album ended up being first or second takes on all the guitar pieces. So that was a big relief, where it was like, okay, like that was the hard part. Once we got that through, then it was the cleaning up. Yeah. Sometimes those flubs or imperfections in any work of art is kind of what also makes it unique. Yeah, I think it gives it personality, and I don't want things to be too perfect, but you do want your playing to sound good. Sure. You're like, and especially trying to do technical pieces, you want them to sound impressive. Yeah, you know? So with that in mind, what are you hoping to accomplish when you set out to write a song or create an album? You mentioned technique, but I guess what was your intention when you're trying to do the best that you can? So it's going to sound really bad because I'm going to use the word product, but when I'm making a song, I try to think of it, to me, I want to make a good product, something where it's just like a really nice piece of music that's well composed. And I don't have any musical training, like any theory or anything like that. And something that this is more of a personal opinion, but something that kind of bugs me in the whole like post John Fahey American primitive genre of guitar playing is like it can at times be like very rambling and unmelodic and like aimless, right? Like I don't like these like 13-minute long solo guitar pieces where it's just like they get in an open tuning and they just like go in a scale and it's like very quote esoteric. And in my eyes, it kind of feels like bullshit. It's just like I kind of moved out of that where it's like if I'm going to play guitar, I want it to be a song. Like I want there to be a specific melody. I kind of moved out of like droning, esoteric, rambling guitar pieces. Because to me, it's like I can't listen to an hour of solo, like an hour-long solo guitar album. Like even with John Fahey, some of his like purely solo releases, it's hard to listen to somebody play solo guitar for an hour. So I've kind of had a focus on it needs to be super melodic and it needs to be a song. You know, it has to be something somebody can hum the melody to. So that was my goal with what I'm making is like it needs to be a song. That's my whole deal. Is like I'm kind of over the esoteric rambling guitar shit. It's just there's too much of it.
Yeah.
You know.
Got it. Cool. I'm excited to hear it. So September 2021, and are you allowed to say what it's called?
I can't say it yet because they haven't announced the record yet.
So September 21, Hayden Pedigo, new album Through Mexican Summer. How many tracks?
7.
7 tracks.
Yeah.
Bated breath over here. I'm excited to hear it, and yeah, congrats on that. And then how about so you're a musician, excellent musician. You also recently created a documentary called Kid Candidate. And tell me about that, whatever you want to say about that.
So the documentary, I didn't create it. I'm basically just the subject of this documentary called Kid Candidate that this production company, Gunpowder and Sky, made. In Gunpowder and Sky, they did that movie Lords of Chaos, that weird black metal movie. And they also just did the Hulu documentary on Tekashi 6ix9ine, which is kind of weird. But back in 2018, this is going to be the quick version, I made a satirical city council video saying I was running for city council in Amarillo. And it kind of took off. The local news reported on it and took it serious, thinking that I was actually running for city council. So during that time, I decided to actually do a serious run for city council in my hometown. And the production company, Gunpowder and Sky, when it just started, I contacted them like, hey, y'all should consider making a documentary on this. So there was only a few weeks before this whole campaign started. So they got a director, cinematographer, they flew them out to Amarillo, and then they followed me for 3 months running for city council in a conservative Texas town, and they filmed the whole thing. So this documentary profiles my entire journey from a satirical video to an actual city council campaign in Amarillo, and showing how big money has kind of destroyed politics in Amarillo, because there's a PAC there called Amarillo Matters that prevents any candidate without money from running.
Oh, gosh.
Because basically they'll filter 6 figures into campaigns for candidates that they choose, who are these upper Amarillo class elite people. And they always win across the board. Their mayor and 4 council members that they choose and endorse win every time. They just won their 3rd term, the same group of people that are funded by this PAC. Across the board, they win every time. And in this documentary, I ran as a no donation candidate. I took no money at all. But the whole documentary is interesting because it shows, like, it starts off as like a dumb kid running for public office who, through this film, I kind of exposed how sleazy the politics are in my hometown and how skewed it is, and how if you want to run for public office in Amarillo, if you're not rich, you can't win. It's impossible. Yeah. So that's kind of what the film is about. But it comes out July. It's been showing at festivals like South by Southwest and the San Francisco Documentary Festival. So it comes out officially in July so people can see it.
I can't wait to see it. And it's acclaimed. I mean, it's getting good reviews.
So far. Yeah, so far.
That is so cool. I mean, you're like Mark Twain, satire. It's brilliant. It's the idea, at least. I haven't seen it, but I imagine it's great. So I saw the satirical the original video that you made, where you're like measuring the waterway and throwing a chair and the funny suit on. What was the reasoning around that initial video? Was that just for fun?
Yeah, that was just a joke. Like
just messing around.
Yeah, that was something I made with a friend in one day just because we were bored. Like it had nothing to do with anything, and we didn't think it would. I thought it'd be something funny to put on my Instagram.
Yeah.
And the joke was I put it up on my Instagram, and my wife said, "You should put it up on Facebook." And I was like, "No, I don't really post goofy stuff on Facebook." And she was like, "I'll just go ahead and do it." And putting it up on Facebook is what actually led it to kind of going crazy, because then it got 70,000 views on the Facebook upload, and that's how the news started reporting on it. Yeah. And it started off as just a dumb video. That was it.
So then when you were running and you were trying to win, like if you had won, you were trying to win.
Yes.
And so did you have to come up with did you know enough about what you were even running for when you were fake running?
Well, yeah, so that's what was kind of the interesting thing, was like I had frustrations about Amarillo because I grew up there and had a bunch of friends that would move away because they thought Amarillo was a lost cause. And there was a bunch of things about the city that bothered me, how it functioned. I felt like it was set up where young people had no future there. And beyond that, the way the local government was set up was really unnerving and strange, because Amarillo is a little over 200,000 people, but their city council is at large, meaning that the mayor and 4 council members represent the entire city, where most bigger cities have a council set up by district. So you will only represent the district of town you live in. You're not going to represent the entire city. So where it becomes a problem is you get 5 wealthy people on the council who all live in the nice part of town. They have no clue what's going on in the rest of the city. So it becomes this very slanted, biased form of governing, where the low-income type communities in Amarillo just get pushed to the side because no one's representing them at all. But those at-large governments, a lot of bigger cities like Amarillo, there's a reason they don't switch over to district, because they know if you get people in their communities representing them, you'll have to care more. And they don't want to do that because they don't want to spend money on low-income communities, because that's not going to make them money.
Who wants to care?
Exactly. Yeah. Who wants to care when there's not money involved? And that's where it becomes problematic. And they know this. It's not an accident that they've kept this at-large government. Right. So to answer your question, I did have to learn a lot of issues fairly quickly, because I would say I wasn't the most ideal candidate to run for public office. Yeah. And the film shows this as well. There was a local attorney who kind of helped me learn a lot of issues, and he was a very brash, harsh attorney who would call me an idiot to my face. Like, rough dude, harsh attorney. But he was very instrumental because he was my harshest critic, like by far. Yeah. But he was also the guy that was helping me understand what I was doing, because I wasn't going to run as a gag candidate. Like, I was doing it in a serious way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I imagine it's very entertaining and also educational, because, I mean, I think it's interesting. Well, first of all, that it came out of nowhere. It came out of you just messing around with your friend. Then all of a sudden it becomes a serious pursuit that starts to uncover the nuances of local politics in West Texas. But I think doing it on a small scale, and I mean local city council, versus you trying to, run against Donald Trump or something. Yeah, it's fascinating because it's a microcosm for a larger story in a part of the world that's, if people aren't from here, probably don't know anything about. But I think it'll be an interesting way in for people learning about the intricacies of how people get elected and who gets neglected. And anyway, I'm excited to see that. You said it comes out in July. Yeah, July. It'll be available wherever.
Yeah, just video on demand.
Cool.
Amazon, iTunes, all that stuff.
Good stuff. Kid candidate. And then the idea of, you mentioned your friends leaving Amarillo, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I get the sense that your kind of stance or perspective on things is, don't run from a place because there's not artistic or cultural inspirations. Yeah. But why don't we stay here and create it here and become kind of a magnet for our hometown?
Yeah. And that's something kind of funny about Amarillo is, obviously, like you said, a lot of people I knew left. because they were more creative and felt like there was no opportunities for them. And the weird thing is I kind of, I guess, learned a way to get attention because I was from Amarillo.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know, if somebody launches a bizarre city council campaign in Portland or Austin, it's not really news. Like, that's kind of like, okay, that's what people do in Portland or Austin. They act weird. They're more out there. Or if you do it in Amarillo, it gets more attention because it's such a different backdrop. And I kind of learned to use Amarillo as an advantage because the backdrop was so different that everything I would do seemed really strange there. And it always kind of got me more attention. You know, people, if you were like, oh, I'm doing this in Amarillo, people are like, oh, that's weird. You don't hear about stuff going on there. And because of the internet, it's kind of changed the game on what you can do. You know, it's just like I was able to, you know, sign a record deal with Mexican Summer, and I didn't have to move to LA or New York to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because of the internet, you know, you can really just do whatever you want anywhere. And I'm not going to lie, it is hard living in places like that when there's not so much of an interesting community to work off of. You kind of feel like you have to do everything yourself, and that can get kind of tiring, and you can lose inspiration quick. So I'm not telling people go move to Amarillo or Lubbock or things like that, because it's not easy and sometimes kind of sucks.
Yeah.
But I've just kind of learned how to make it work.
Cool. Back to using your constraints as an advantage.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's interesting. And then you mentioned you have a day job as an administrator at a school, or you used to work at a bank. I think what's neat about that, and it's easy to romanticize musicians or artists and think that they're, you know, only doing that 24/7. But the fact that you do have a more conventional day job, and then you're creating this beautiful artwork on nights and weekends, I think that in a way is more inspiring than that romantic vision of a full-time musician, because it's like, hey, there is extra time in the day, and I've talked to Patrick about this too. If you want to create something, and for folks who maybe are or are not, or are making excuses for not, if you have a day job, there's still lots of time in the day and the week for you to create.
Yeah.
And you can still explore these avenues creatively. And I think that's very inspiring. And also it reminds us that whoever you meet, you have no idea what, you know, I was thinking about it this morning when I woke up at the Walmart parking lot, and there's a guy, a Walmart employee walking around, you know, cleaning up the parking lot. Mm-hmm. And, you know, for all I know, that guy's going home and painting a beautiful picture, or, you know, making films, or who knows.
Yeah.
But it kind of makes you think, whoever you meet, you don't know necessarily what's inside them.
Yeah, I mean, Charles Ives, like one of the greatest American composers, was an insurance salesman during the day. Lauren Connors, the amazing avant-garde guitarist, was a janitor at a college. You know, you never know what someone's creating. And the weird thing is like working at this high school, the day I signed the deal with Mexican Summer, it was kind of weird because like they sent like a giant document that you have to print out and sign, like a contract. And it was weird because I printed it off at work. It was like printing off a record contract at the copier around people sitting at office desk, and like no one knows about it. And I was thinking to myself, like, I'm signing a record deal with Mexican Summer in the office of a high school, just like sending it back on the work copier. And it was just kind of funny to me. It was awesome. Just like wearing slacks, and they're so separate, but I kind of like that stuff.
Yeah.
Because I like the weird divide.
Yeah.
And I also like being secretive about it. Like, no one at work knows what I do.
Yeah.
I don't tell people what I do, but it's kind of funny thing. Like, I signed a record deal in this copy room.
You flip the desk. You're like, you guys ever heard of Mexican Summer?
And they're just like, no. Let's go back to work. They probably haven't.
That's hilarious. Yeah, that is kind of secretive. Also, not in any way intending to equate this podcast to what's required talent-wise of your music, but having a side project that is somewhat creative, that's different than the way I make money during the week. It's a nice balance in a sense that like the day job kind of keeps my feet on the ground and keeps me humble, and also teaches me things about communication and the importance of persistence and process and all that stuff that I can then apply to to this
Yeah.
podcast project, and hopefully have developed good habits through my job work that could benefit this work, and then vice versa. The communication practice that happens with this show and just sort of the nurturing of curiosity and learning about different types of people translates nicely, I think, to making my day job more interesting too.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I can't create unless I have stability. That's kind of how my brain works. Like, I can't make music if I'm worried about paying the bills. Like, I just couldn't. So I've always needed a day job for that stability. Like just to know like my stuff's taken care of. I couldn't. I don't know. I feel like I couldn't rely on being a full-time musician because I feel like I'd be so stressed out.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I could handle that.
Yeah, I can relate to that for sure. Well, Hayden, thank you for being on the show. Anything else you want to add, or anything else we didn't cover?
No, thank you so much for chatting with me. This is great.
Yeah, pleasure. And also thank you for making your music. I think as a non-musician, someone who loves music and who has benefited from music my whole life, I think musicians are so important and so valuable, and through your talents and skills are able to open up portals for the rest of us non-musicians to experience life on a different plane, on a more rich and interesting plane through whatever you create. So I think sometimes we overlook how incredible the contribution of musicians is. So I want to make sure to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And keep it going. Don't stop. And can't wait to hear the new album in September. And then until then, listeners, you can listen to Hayden Pedigo on Spotify. All your stuff's on Spotify?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Hayden Pedigo. And Instagram?
Yep. Yeah, on Instagram.
Cool. Good stuff, man. Well, thanks.
Thank you.
That's Hayden Pedigo. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Check out Hayden's music on Spotify. Follow him on Instagram at Amarillo Highway. And keep your eyes and ears out for his new record in September for Mexican Summer, and the documentary about his city council run called Kid Candidate, which comes out in July. Thanks for tuning in, everybody out there. Take care of yourselves. We'll end here on more from Hayden's album Greetings from Amarillo, including a poem written and read by the great Terry Allen. So long, everyone.
Sirens in the dust, Amarillo in the rain. Every distance so far away it might as well be California. Every song tires on the highway, wheels on the rail. Cops chasing killers across the front page, the second and third, all the way past Tulia down to Plainview. Yesterday's news, tattooed on the Vietnam vet's stump, on the Baghdad vet's burns and bone. Just motion, little honey. Sirens in the dust, calling you home.